everybody. Back episode 3 of Coordinated Chaos. Your boy just got back from Philadelphia, going to go watch the Monday Night Football game in Philly. It was absolutely electric. It was so much fun. The Eagles looked fantastic in that, the best I've seen Jalen Hurts play pretty much ever. So we'll cover a little bit of that a little bit later. Today we're going to do a little bit of a segment I call Pretenders and Contenders. Just going to kind of go through some of the teams that I believe are actual contenders for the playoffs, long playoff runs, Super Bowl, and then pretenders of teams that I just don't see it happening this season. And I mean, I could be completely wrong with some of these, but I think I have a pretty good grasp after 2 weeks. It's pretty early on, but a lot of these teams have shown us some things that are concerning and some things that are very positive for their team. So we'll see. I'm going to get right into this. I'm also going to do a Thursday Night Football preview as well between the Steelers and the Browns at the end there. All right, let's start off with some contenders. Kansas City Chiefs, they played Thursday night, beat the Chargers in an actual like full-blown battle. Justin Herbert gets kind of knocked around, has some fractured rib cartilage now, but he powered through and almost got back into that game at the very end there. It was a really good matchup on Thursday Night Football. You can't really ask for a better one. It's going to be a little bit of a letdown this week with the Steelers and Browns game, considering they don't have real like franchise QBs right this second. But you really can't ask for a better Thursday Night Football game than Chiefs-Chargers, divisional matchup like that. Chiefs continue to look really good. The Chargers, I still have a ton of confidence in. I think both of these teams, Kansas City and LA Chargers, are going to be contenders going forward. It's going to be tough because obviously they're in the same division, so one of them is going to have to win the division. I think it's probably going to end up being the Chiefs. But the Chargers will, at the very least, I believe, get a solid wild card spot and probably make some noise in the playoffs. Kansas City, for me, is a Super Bowl contender. Chargers are on the cusp of that, I believe. I just think they got to get Herbert healthy and make sure he's good for the long-term run this year. Just be careful with him, but while also trying to, keep up in the AFC West there. Next contender I'm coming through with is the Dolphins. The Dolphins played the Ravens, and I actually believe both of those teams are also contenders this year. The Dolphins showed me something this week. I didn't see it with Tua. Tua has taken over as a fantastic facilitator of all the weapons on that offense. And if he continues to do that and really doesn't make as many mistakes as he has in the last 2 years, they're going to be tough to beat because overall, as I've been kind of saying, the Dolphins roster is ready to go. They are Super Bowl contender ready. It's really a matter of if Tua can put it all together, and he did on Sunday, had 6 TDs. I mean, Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill both went crazy. Shout out to anybody that had them on their fantasy teams because they were a very happy camper on Sunday. It was an awesome game. I still believe the Ravens are contenders at this point as well. They maybe have lost that game against the Dolphins, but the Dolphins the last 2 years have actually had the Ravens number quite a bit. But the Ravens looked like they were going to, run away with that game. And then the Dolphins, man, with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, just how explosive that offense is for the Dolphins, they can make a game change in an instant. I mean, one big play changes the momentum of a football game. So both teams, I believe, are still contenders for playoffs, long playoff runs, even potentially Super Bowl berth. So both of those are really good teams. I'm going to go down with some pretenders. Now, I think we have the Titans as a pretender at this point. The loss of A.J. Brown is turning into something that I think was bigger than people expected it to be. I think they thought when they drafted Treylon Burks, he was essentially that same type of player in college as A.J. Brown. It just hasn't translated just yet to the NFL. I think we're going to have a little bit of a lull here for the Titans. Treylon can definitely still turn into a very good wide receiver in the NFL, but I think it's just going to take him some time. The rest of the weapons on that offense are just okay at this point. He's relying a lot on some like very new pieces on that offense. Ryan Tannehill is having to throw to the Kyle Phillips of the world, the Nick Westbrook-Akines, those guys, and I don't know how much he can get done with those just average weapons. Derrick Henry is not as effective because the pass game is not as effective. That play action game is what kind of helped Derrick Henry get some open lanes, and he's having to run into probably completely stacked boxes at this point. So it's going to be tough sledding for the Titans moving forward. They have lost to two teams. I mean, the Bills are crazy good. I don't really, blame them for losing to that team, but the fact they lost to the Giants in week one, and week one's kind of fluky sometimes, so maybe the Titans can make a little bit of a run if, the chemistry between Ryan Tannehill and that team gets, or in the wide receivers get kind of fixed, but moving forward, I think they're pretenders until they prove otherwise. Another pretender I have right now, unfortunately, the Arizona Cardinals. Even though they did win against the Raiders, it took like everything they had to make it happen. They just haven't looked all that great. It's really a whole lot of Kyler Murray making things happen, and like if he doesn't, then they lose. So it's really just Kyler Murray hero ball. Cliff Kingsbury, I don't think is really helping them out a whole lot right now. Their weapons are just okay. James Conner got a little banged up in this game, so we'll see what's going on with him moving forward. He's a solid weapon, but he has injury history. Marquise Hollywood Brown, he is a really good player. He just sometimes has some drop issues. He had a big play at the end of the game there to, help them win that game, and he got dislodged from the ball essentially on a pretty big play. It didn't matter ultimately because Kyler Murray made some stuff happen at the very end there, just going crazy, scrambling all over the place. But moving forward, I just don't see it with the Cardinals. They do get DeAndre Hopkins back week, I believe, 7 because he's on a 6-game suspension. So maybe the offense can kind of round into form by then and be a little bit better. It really does look like the NFC West could be kind of more up for grabs than I anticipated. But we'll see. Next, as a pretender, I do have the same team that the Cardinals played, which is the Raiders. It's just really based on the fact that whole division, the AFC West, is so tough. Like I was saying before, Kansas City and the Chargers are going to be the top of that division. And then the Broncos and Raiders are basically going to be fighting for third. I said in the offseason to, friends of mine and whatnot, just kind of discussing some of the offseason moves that were happening. When Davante Adams got traded there, they traded a whole lot of draft capital, and they haven't drafted very well in the last few years anyway. So, I mean, I don't really blame them for saying, screw the draft, we'll go get a proven commodity like Davante Adams. But at the same time, that's a ton of draft capital with a team that, yes, they made the playoffs last year, but I didn't really believe in them a whole lot. I thought that was kind of they got a lot of momentum, and it just kind of happened for them. And they traded for Davante Adams thinking that would kind of put them right over the edge, get them over that hump. But it's just the other teams in the division are just so much better than them. The defense is still a little questionable for the Raiders. And Josh McDaniels is still early on in his head coaching tenure. He's still learning how to do some things. So I just have the Raiders right now as pretenders just because realistically it's the division. If they were in any other division, I would give them a chance. But right now, that's the way I'm looking at it. All right, let's go back to some contenders. We have the Buccaneers. They have looked a little shaky the first 2 weeks of the season. Didn't score a whole lot in either game against the Cowboys or the Saints. But I will say I give the benefit of the doubt to them. They're a championship type team. I mean, they won the Super Bowl 2 years ago. Tom Brady, you have to give him the benefit of the doubt because of the fact that he's the greatest of all time, essentially. And I think they will round into form as players get healthier and whatnot. Once that O-line gets a little bit more chemistry and they gel a little bit better, I think it's going to be better for them. The defense is rocking right now. They're the thing that is essentially keeping them afloat right now while the offense is still struggling a bit. I just hope that Brady doesn't have that 1 foot out the door mentality, and this is why the offense is struggling. So I'd still have them in contenders. They're slightly they're almost dropping into pretender level, even though they are 2-0, one of the only 2-0 teams. But I think, like I said, they'll round into form. Tom Brady will get rallies the troops, and they'll be fine. Especially in the NFC South where there's not that much competition. Especially they had that huge division win against the Saints, who I think is next best in that division. Let's go to another contender. I am going to stick with the Rams as a contender so far. The Rams got ransacked week 1 against the Bills, but so has pretty much everybody else. Ask the Titans. They got absolutely destroyed. The Bills are on a mission. They're going crazy this year. But I do see the Rams also rounding into form. I'm just hoping that Matt Stafford's elbow issue is kind of in the rearview mirror. I don't know for sure. It could still be bothering him, and he's just not letting anybody know, really. So that could potentially, be a concern going forward. But I do believe that, like I said, for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I think that O-line has struggled so far in the beginning of the season. But I think as they play more together, they'll gel together and they'll get better. And Sean McVay is a good enough coach and offensive mind to kind of mitigate that by just, doing some game plan specific, some scheme things to, make the O-line a little less of a problem. The defense is still pretty good. They have playmakers. Bobby Wagner's a solid addition. He's a great leader. So is Jalen Ramsey, Aaron Donald. I think they're probably going to be fine. They're not going to be as good as they were last year on the defensive end, but it is what it is. And once again, like I said, the NFC West is a little bit more up for grabs this year. I think San Fran's their biggest competitor, obviously, in that division. But yeah, so Rams contender. Let's go 49ers. Was just talking about them as the biggest, challenge to the Rams. The 49ers are definitely a contender. Trey Lance, unfortunately, gets hurt, breaks his ankle, kind of the same type of injury as Dak Prescott had. I guess that was 2 years ago now. So he's out. Jimmy Garoppolo, thank God they didn't trade him. That worked out well in their favor. They couldn't have asked for a better situation to happen other than basically Jimmy Garoppolo taking that pay cut and staying on the roster and not basically forcing his way out completely. So he takes back over. That makes them probably a better team right this second. Trey Lance, I was hoping was kind of going to round into form, but it just wasn't happening, and he got hurt really early in week 2. We never really got to see what he was capable of because of week 1, the monsoon, whatnot, whatever. But man, Jimmy Garoppolo had him in the NFC Championship game last year, had him in the Super Bowl a couple years ago. He's just a consistent player. He's going to make mistakes. He's going to make some dumb throws. He's going to make he's just so consistent that it's hard to beat the 49ers because of how good Shanahan is scheming up the run game and the passing game, using their weapons like Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk. Looks like Jeff Wilson's going to take over while Elijah Mitchell is out. Hopefully he gets healthier, and then they could really make a run. The 49ers defense is really, really good right now, and we'll see if Jimmy G can kind of rally the troops like he has done the last few years. But I think they're still contenders in the NFC. Next, let's go to some pretenders again. I have the Broncos. They have looked very, very shaky so far this season. Russell Wilson has looked kind of cooked. They want him to cook, but he's looking fried. So I don't know. I haven't watched enough of I watched that Monday night game, and it was very concerning. Nathaniel Hackett still, especially in week 2, still making weird decisions. I don't know. That defense isn't good enough really for my liking. They have weapons. They could, like a lot of these other teams, they could round into form, but man, it's just that division, just like the Raiders. The Chargers and the Chiefs are going to be the top 2 teams. I would guarantee that. And so the Broncos and Raiders are fighting for third, and they better hope they just end up having a good record at the end of the season, just to see if they can potentially slip into a wild card spot. If all the other teams in the AFC kind of just plummet. It's possible, but right now I have the Broncos as pretenders. I don't think it's going to get marginally better or really worse. I don't think it can get really any worse than it has been the last 2 weeks. So that's just unfortunately where I'm at right now. They have weapons, so it can turn around, but we'll see how that goes. Another pretender. This is going to shock some people, but after 2 weeks, man, I just can't believe in this team, and that is the Cincinnati Bengals. They came off of a Super Bowl berth in the AFC, and I think they got a little bit big-headed with how much they thought, like how much better they thought they were than pretty much every other team in the NFL, and they are getting humbled quickly. They spent so much money on the O line this year trying to protect Joe Burrow because of how bad the O line was last year, historically bad last year, and they've just picked up where they left off last year and just continued to be bad. Um, I mean, it's crazy how much money they spend on the O line, and it's just not coming together yet. And I mean, I feel like a broken record at this point talking about how much O lines can gel together as time goes on. So there's a chance they make a run. The AFC North is looking like it's up for grabs again. I think Baltimore's probably the best team in that division right this second. But then, the Bengals could, like I said, make a run and come back, win that division. They'll have, obviously a playoff berth at that point. But it's just not looking good right now. And I think the Ravens are probably the better team. And the Bengals could end up, getting a wild card spot. But right now, I think they're pretenders until they prove otherwise with the O line. So that's where I have them at. Let's get back to some contenders. This one is very iffy, kind of on the bubble of not being a contender, but I gave them the benefit of the doubt here. I'm going to go with the Packers. They are still a contender to me, basically just because of Aaron Rodgers and the capabilities of that defense, as long as the defensive coordinator for the Packers doesn't make any more dumb decisions with the way they do matchups and stuff like that. I think he made some adjustments in week 2. It was the Bears, though, so we don't really know for sure. The Bears look not so hot. So, I mean, it could be just the fact that Aaron Rodgers, like he's told everybody, just owns Chicago, the city, everything about them. So, I mean, I was not shocked that the Packers came out and kind of whooped them. But I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to say that the Packers still end up going and winning that division, especially the way the Vikings looked against the Eagles on Monday night. I think the Packers will round into form. The wide receivers will get some more chemistry with Aaron Rodgers, and it'll be fine at the end of the day. I don't see them as like a full-blown Super Bowl contender at this point, but playoff contender, yeah, because I think they're going to win the division. Next, Bills, obviously, Super Bowl contender. Long playoff run contender, whatever you want to call it. They look incredible. They're just smoking everybody in their path right now, and I don't see a whole lot of games on their schedule that I say this is a game they can lose. They do have some tough games coming up, and I believe they do play Kansas City at some point, so that's going to be such a good game. I mean, everybody's eyeballs are going to be glued to that screen once again just because of the way the divisional game happened last year. Historically, one of the best games ever, probably. So the Bills, man, they're on the right path to the Super Bowl right now. I don't think there's a team probably better than them. I think the Chiefs are right there. The Chiefs haven't played just like as good as the Titans, but I think the Chiefs have played better teams so far. So we'll see. But those are obviously the cream of the crop right there with in the AFC, which is the Bills and the Chiefs. All right, let's get back to some pretenders. We have the Cowboys. Even though they did have a pretty impressive showing against the Bengals and they won that game on the back of Cooper Rush, who would have thought? I mean, the Bengals just couldn't handle the defense of the Cowboys. Cooper Rush made just enough plays. He had great chemistry with Noah Brown. Got a touchdown there. Was throwing the ball to CD in good spots. They were running the ball pretty well against the Bengals. So they just put together a solid game plan and were able to squeak out one against the Bengals. But the Cowboys, man, I don't see it really continuing. I think they're going to have a tough time with Cooper Rush until Dak Prescott comes back. Dak, he may come back early. That could, bode well or bad for the Cowboys. I mean, he could rush back and his thumb not be completely healed, and then he looked like Russell Wilson did at the end of last season, and he just didn't really round back into form. But I don't know. It could be over before, that point in time. The Eagles could grab too many division wins before Dak Prescott comes back, and then it's essentially over for the Cowboys. So we'll see. And Washington's looking pretty solid right now, too. So I don't know what to think of the Cowboys moving forward until we really get a full look of the Cowboys with a healthy Dak again. And that might not come until later, like very late in the season. So we'll see. Another pretender It is a 2-0 team, New York Giants. Probably the worst 2-0 team maybe in the history of football. They squeaked out a win against the Titans, and then they won last week against a bad Panthers team, unfortunately. The Panthers have been disappointing so far. I don't know what their deal is. I would say it's mostly on Matt Rule. I just don't trust him as a head coach. I think if they get a new coach this offseason, things will probably turn around a little bit. But yeah, Giants, they've beaten two teams that are kind of on the decline, so I don't trust them. I don't really believe in that team just yet. But I mean, it's a step in the right direction because, like I said last week, I believe that these are two games they probably would have dropped if it were any other, front office head coach combo. They're moving the right direction with Shane and Dayball, so we'll see how that transpires as the season goes on. But they have a big Monday Night Football game this upcoming week against the Cowboys. They rarely, in the past few years, have beaten the Cowboys. It's almost inevitable the Cowboys win that matchup. But with Cooper Rush being in the game, the Giants having some confidence, coming out 2-0, they could flip the script. And, I mean, the Giants could end up being 3-0. So it's crazy how the NFL works, but I do not see the Giants as an actual contender in the NFC, even though they have started out well. Next, I'm going to go with the Eagles as a contender. That Monday Night Football game I was at live was probably the best game I could have picked on the schedule to go to. It was a dominant performance by the Eagles. Jalen Hurts looked the best I think he's ever looked in the history of his career. He was making throws that I didn't think he was even capable of making. So it looks like he's on a really good progression. He's gotten a little bit better every year, basically since college. So if that just continues, then I have way more confidence as an Eagles fan that he's going to be able to put it together all the way through this season and then potentially even, instill enough confidence for the Eagles to really commit to him long term. But I think I have to see these type of performances replicated throughout the entire season for me to be really all the way in. But I'm as close as I've ever been to just completely blindly giving Jalen Hurts all my trust, my fandom. I've done it in the past. I did it with Carson Wentz, and he absolutely scarred me. He broke my heart. I'm basically like a scarred human being at this point. So I just can't jump all the way on a bandwagon until I see all the proof I need to just give Jalen Hurts all of my support. So we need to see this replicated. Jalen Hurts looked incredible on Monday night against the Vikings team that a lot of people were saying were a big time player in the NFC, especially coming off that game against the Packers. And then of course the Eagles defense looked incredible as well. They completely adjusted the way they did things against the Vikings offense, different from what they did against the Lions in week 1. And it worked to perfection. Darius Slay locked up Justin Jefferson, which is something you don't see a whole lot of. That could have been more of a product of the fact that Kirk Cousins completely shriveled. But that's what happens when you put a lot of pressure on Kirk Cousins. And the Eagles had a lead, kept a lead, so that puts a lot of pressure on a QB to try to get back into a game, and he made some mistakes. So with that being said, I actually do still have very close on the verge of coming off of this and being a pretender, but I'm going to stick with them as a contender, at least a playoff contender, potentially decent playoff run contender, and that is the Vikings. Even though they got smoked by the Eagles Monday night, I still think they have a very good roster. The defense is much improved from last year. They do a little bit too much of a simple scheme, so I'm thinking that their defensive coordinator will eventually make some adjustments, kind of like how Jonathan Gannon did from week 1 to week 2 for the Eagles. So we'll see how that goes, but I mean the Vikings offense can be very explosive. They have good players. It's just a matter of if Kirk Cousins can be that catalyst to get them over the hump. And then let's end with one last pretender. Unfortunately, this is going to be the Indianapolis Colts. They have looked horrendous the first 2 weeks this season. Matt Ryan has looked super cooked. I don't know if there's a little bit of regret coming out of that organization that they let Carson Wentz go because he's looked pretty good for Washington. He's made some plays. He's still made some very Wentz-like mistakes, but I mean, he's leading the league in passing touchdowns at this point. So I don't know. They may have some regrets, but they got manhandled by Jacksonville, who's much improved now. Shout out to Jacksonville for winning. That was a huge game. Shout out to the Jets for winning. That was a huge game for them. And then also shout out to Detroit for winning. Detroit looked pretty good again. But yeah, Colts, pretenders for the time being. I don't see it really turning around, unfortunately. And we might have a new... I mean, the Jacksonville Jaguars could end up winning the AFC South. That would be super wild, but I see a path where it can happen. So we'll see how that goes, but that's going to be a really fun division to check out just because, I mean, I don't think any of the teams are great, but just to see that race is going to be really fun going forward. So that's pretty much all I got for contenders and pretenders. Let me know what you think about it. I mean, you might have some different opinions than me, but I think I'm pretty spot on with this for the time being. But yeah, let's get right into this Thursday night football matchup between the Steelers and the Browns. I think the Browns end up winning this game. And it's really just based on the fact that Steelers O-line has looked so rough and Myles Garrett is just such a beast. Really, and their coverage the Browns can have with Denzel Ward. They have good safeties. They have good DBs all over the place. They got the Joker in the middle, Sione Takitaki. I mean, they got players on the defensive side, and I think this is going to be a game where Jacoby Brissett's going to be able to do just enough throwing the ball to Amari Cooper, getting the ball out of his hands to Kareem Hunt, running the ball with Nick Chubb. I think they're going to do just enough to get by here. The Steelers have looked a little rough. But the Steelers' defense is still pretty good. The problem is they're without TJ Watt again, so that's a huge loss. I think the Browns sneak by the Steelers in this one, and the Steelers, they just can't make enough plays. And I think this may be that catalyst game where Mitch Trubisky kind of makes a few too many mistakes trying to make things happen, and they're going to start thinking about benching him for Kenny Pickett, which I think ultimately will be a good thing for the Steelers moving forward. But yeah, that's what I got for the Thursday Night Football matchup. I appreciate you guys tuning in. This is pretty much it for the podcast. Shout out Weston, my guy editing, once again. Follow us on all of the socials. We're all over YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. We have it all at Coordinated Chaos. Some of them's at Coordinated Chaos NFL, so you might have to search a little bit. But we're out there, and we're trying to get some more followers, subscriptions. We're on Spotify as a podcast. It's a video and a podcast feed. So, yeah, I appreciate you guys tuning in, and we'll see you next week. See ya.